So we're going to talk about some watercolor techniques. And you guys are going to, you can start by labeling your papers. And you have a set of watercolors. They may or may not look like this one. There's a brush in there. You can also, if you have other brushes, use other brushes. The other thing you're going to need is water that's clean. It does sort of end up getting different colors in the water. You know, the water gets kind of stained after a while, so you might want to get some clean water every once in a while so it doesn't mess up your colors. Whenever you're painting, you also want to have like a paper towel or something. So if you're changing colors, you can wash your brush and kind of blot it dry a little bit when you need to. So to start out, and you want your ruler and a pencil right now, I have lots of different techniques to show you that I want you to practice along. And so to start out with, to make these boxes, you're going to do these in your sketchbook unless you have a bunch of watercolor paper. Look, if you have a watercolor pad of your own, you can do that. But the bigger pieces of watercolor paper that I gave you are more for projects. But to make these boxes in your sketchbook, to make them kind of neat, I left a little space in between because watercolor runs before it dries. But all you need to do is, if you line up the edge of your ruler with the edge of your sketchbook or the edge of your page, it's going to make a 90-degree angle. So to make my little boxes kind of neat, I just traced my ruler. So I just went across the top lightly and across the bottom. And then to make the rectangles, I just lined up the edge of the ruler with my top line. Or you can line them up with the ones above it, and made them into little squares. So you can start with that. I have 3 rows of them because we're going to practice a bunch of different techniques. Most of you guys have probably used watercolors, you know, in elementary school when you were a kid, but there's lots of different things that you can do with them that you might not have tried before. And you guys might know other ones that I don't, which if you do, you know, or if there's ones that I forgot, feel free to tell us about them and we can add those if we want to. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 12 here. So I have 12 little boxes that are kind of even, and we're just going to kind of go through one by one. We might not finish all of them today, but the first one, so you can just label it watercolor techniques. So the first one is a flat wash. A little bit lower maybe. Okay. So a flat wash just means an even wash of color. So to start, you want to get some, and if you have a few brushes, you know, sometimes it's nice to have a few brushes going. So whatever color you want to start with, you can try some different colors for different ones just to see what they look like. You want to get some water in there and kind of activate it. Obviously, the more water you have in there, the lighter your value is going to be, or, you know, the shade, the value. The more paint, the darker it's going to be. So for a flat wash, the idea is to just kind of get it the same color all the way across. And if you go out of your lines a little bit, it doesn't matter in this case. We're practicing. But the idea for a flat wash is you want to get it an even amount of color all over. So to do that, you have to work quickly, because if you put like a stripe of watercolor and then you stop and it dries and you go to add more, watercolor is transparent, it's see-through. So if you stop, then you get like a stripe that you can't really get rid of. So the second thing, so a flat wash is just practicing getting it even. A graded wash, it's a little hard to do in this smallest space. Maybe I'll switch to a smaller brush. And there's round brushes and flat brushes. Flat brushes are this kind. They're kind of flat across the top. Sometimes those are easier for edges. Round brushes are a little more round in shape. So for my graded wash, I'm going to start with getting my color on there so it's, mostly color and not a lot of water. And a graded wash, it goes from dark to light. All right, so maybe I have a lot of pigment in there on my brush at first. So then instead of dipping it in the paint after that, I'm just going to dip it in some water and get, quickly before it dries, get a little more water in there. So the edge of that like bead of paint, I'm kind of pulling down, and then maybe I get a little more water and get some of the pigment on the brush. So then it gradually, instead of adding more pigment, I'm just adding water and kind of dragging it down. So if you were going to do something like a sunset, or a little too much water right there. If you're going to do something like a sunset or like twilights, or, like you wanted a gradation where it goes a little gradually from darker to lighter, that's a graded wash. And you can even do a graded wash from one color into the next, like if you were doing a sunset. So the next thing, so flat wash is an even bead of color, even value of color. Graded wash goes from darker to lighter. And some of these will be a little easier to see when they dry too. For resist, you have an oil pastel. Studio 2, I think you have a black oil pastel in there. Or Studio 1, Studio 2, I think you have a white oil pastel in there. But some kind of oil pastel. And the idea is, so I'm going to take my white oil pastel, and you can't really see it on the white paper right now, but I'm just going to draw a little design in that square. And you can't really see it because it's white on white. But this is waxy and, oil-based. So anything waxy or oil-based, like if you did it with a crayon really heavily, that should work. Let's try a different color. You want a dark color if you have white for this to show up. So let's see what one of our other colors looks like. I'm going to try the blue maybe. All right, so the white oil pastel or the black oil pastel is going to resist the watercolor, so the paper stays basically white or black, depending on what color you used, where you painted over top of it. So that's a resist technique. And there's also, that same thing will work like if you have rubber cement at home and you try to paint on rubber cement as a resist, and then you can peel it off later. Or they sell like masking fluid and things that you can use with watercolor for the same effect. But the oil pastels work pretty well for that. The next technique, and you can also combine these together too. So the next one is wet into wet. So if you get the paper kind of wet to start, and then you put some watercolor into it, it's going to kind of bleed out. And then I can even take a second color. As long as the watercolor is wet, it's going to bleed or run. So my one color is going to run into the next at the edges. But sometimes you want that effect. It looks kind of nifty. So painting wet into wet is just letting the edges, wetting the paper a little bit first, letting the colors run into each other and kind of bleed and, do their thing a little bit. So that's wet into wet. You get these kind of like fuzzy edges like that. Hold it up a little higher. So that's wet into wet where you get the fuzzy edges. The next one And I can also, for wet and sweat, I can even like take another color while it's still wet. Like maybe I take some, is this purple? It's hard to tell, it's so dark. Oh, that's black. All right. Well, maybe I take some black watercolor and even kind of drop it into there while the paint's still pretty wet. And it'll just sort of drift out and flow. So the next one, so far we have a flat wash, one even value. The second one, a graded wash, where it goes gradually from dark to light. The third one is a resist, so you put down some oil pastel first and then paint over it, and the oil resists it. Wet into wet is just like it sounds. You get it wet first and put other colors in while it's still wet, so you get these kind of fuzzy edges and the colors bleed into each other. All right, so the next one underneath the flat wash that we're gonna try is salt. So you can use kosher salt, you can use regular table salt, but this one usually looks kind of cool. It gives it a nifty texture. Let's see, what colors haven't we used yet? I want to try this with a dark color. I don't think it would show up as well with like the yellow or anything. So I'm going to try the purple and see what that looks like. But don't put the watercolor on there until you have the salt right next to you. All right, so I'm going to put some watercolor on there. And I know it's going to buckle the page a little bit with the sketchbook paper, but it'll still work for getting the gist of the idea. So I'm going to take some, this is just, table salt, and I'm going to take some of the salt and sprinkle it into the watercolor while it's wet. And someone with more of a chemistry background than me can explain why better. Maybe ask Mr. Meal, or your chemistry teacher. But when you put the salt in, it kind of repels the watercolor. So you can't tell right now, but after it dries, you'll flick it off, and it will give you this really cool speckly texture. So next time we'll try flicking that off. So underneath that, because it's another one that's going to have to dry, I'm going to try another kind of resist. So I didn't label this one yet, but this one I'm going to do a tape resist. So I'm going to take just some masking tape and put down, and I can even take an X-Acto and make designs with this, but also if I want straight edges in places. So I'm just going to put down some masking tape, and then I'm going to try a different color. Try the orange, although my water is getting the water I'm using is getting kind of a mess, so it might mess up what my orange looks like a little bit. It might not be quite as orange as it should be, but I'm going to paint it over top of that tape, and if it's down flat, that should resist my watercolor, and after it's dry, I can peel that up and see what it looks like. The next one is rubbing alcohol. So if you have this at home, you can try it. So I know not everybody necessarily has this at home, but this is just like rubbing alcohol that you might have in your medicine cabinet. And if you dip a brush in this, make sure it's a clean brush, or you can pour a little bit in a cup and then dip a clean brush into it. Don't dip a dirty paintbrush into a bottle of rubbing alcohol. What you can do with this is, again, you're going to paint your colors first, whatever color you're using. So, and maybe even it's more than one color. You know, maybe I have some purple, and then I also have some like blue in there, and I kind of let them like fade into each other. All right, so then I'm gonna take, while my watercolor is still wet, I'm gonna take my rubbing alcohol on the end of a brush and just drop a little in there. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but so the rubbing alcohol, kind of makes it spread out and gives it this like almost like raindrops on pavement kind of effect. And you can experiment with some of these on bigger paper too if you want. All right, so we're gonna stop there for now and then do the rest on the second video.